Hello. So I am just here for the start and waiting to welcome everyone into our Q&A for our Cuban adventure in November. We've got Alan and Sarah joining us. I'll wait till they pop on. But yes, Cuba has a relationship status of complicated. So I thought it would be wonderful to get on here and answer some of your questions for those of you that are thinking of joining us in November, because it is a little bit more complicated than some countries. So it's just nice to have some personal support, which that's what we're here for. I'm always here for you to contact if you need any help about any process, even if it's just pre-travel nerves. That's what I'm here for, to support you right from the time you book and help you out in any way I can. We will have, I will go over this when Alan and Sarah joins, but we will have an agenda of questions to answer, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A at the end for those of you who are able to make it. And there will be a replay. So I will just wait for Alan and Sarah to join us, and then we will get started. Hi, Joe. How you doing? I'll let you unmute yourself. We're just getting started. We'll just wait for Sarah to come on, and then we'll crack on, because I just thought, Alan, we'll go through that agenda of questions that I sent you, just so we've got some structure, because it's easy to get waylaid and start chatting about other things. I've got a list of them here, and then we'll just open it up at the end if anybody's on the call and has any extra questions, or if there is anything we haven't covered, we can sort of.
That's fine. I've got the list of questions on my other computer next to me, so that's cool.
Because as mentioned, the main ones really is how to get there. And then the visa process. I've just got to admit Ella. Hi Ella, how you doing? We're only just starting. We've got Ellen from Cuba Adventures is here. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ellen? Just want to introduce yourself.
Hello, hi, I'm Ella. I've known Gina for a couple of years now. We went on a retreat together, and I always wanted to go to Cuba. So, and I know it's something that I can do on my own.
Yeah,
so just exploring the option.
I love your background.
Thank you. Yeah, that's also on my list.
I'm Alan from Cuban Adventures. I'm based in Australia, in Adelaide. And I've got a hit bag full of answers, maybe.
So he's our Australasian expert, and then hopefully Sarah from the US is joining us. She's actually going to be en route to Cuba today. So she's actually going to be there from tomorrow. So it'll be interesting I'm going to share her actual social media, just so you can get a feel for what Cuba's like right now. But yeah, it's just the logistics. So I thought it was easier, because I know you're all asking me lots of questions, and I try and do my best and not lead you astray. But as I said in my intro, I like to, if Cuba had a relationship status, it would be complicated.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's not possible, and it doesn't mean that it's not. Here's Sarah now. It doesn't mean that it's not a reason not to go either.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, how are you, Sarah? I'll get you to unmute. So Sarah's joining us from the US, and like I said, she's packing. So I'll just see if she wants to introduce herself. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sarah? Let's see if she does. If not, we'll just crack on, and we'll start with the first ones. Do you just want to start, Ellen? And
Hi, sorry, it wouldn't
Oh.
let me unmute myself.
Oh, there you go.
had the,
Welcome,
you
Sarah.
had the control. There we go. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Abby,
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I work with Alan in the U.S. office.
Cool.
And I just
So-
was telling them you're getting ready to actually go to Cuba now.
I am. I'm packing frantically, even though I've had I've known I was going on this trip for like a month, and wait till the last minute. Don't do that. Don't be me.
That's okay. We all have different methods to pre-travel rituals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought I was just saying to Alan before you joined, Sarah, we'll just go through the questions that I sent on the agenda. And what I'll do is I'll actually just step out and let you and Alan, I'll just introduce the question and then I'll let you and Alan answer as you see fit. And then we'll just go. Is that okay? So
Yep,
the
that's
first one
great.
was regarding the visa process. So obviously there's Alan for the Australasian people and then Sarah for anyone coming from the US. So Alan, do you want to start with the visa process?
well, I think I'm conscious Sarah's on a time
Oh,
constraint.
yeah, you are. Do you want to go first then? We can cover all the US-based stuff first. And then,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Do you have any U.S. travelers on this?
No, but there's some that have that aren't able to join us. So yeah.
Okay, sure. So from the U.S., if you're flying directly from the U.S., you are just going to get the visa at the airport. So there's 4 airlines that fly from the U.S. to Cuba. That's American, Southwest, Delta, and United. And all of those sell visas at the gate. So if you're checking into the airport that you're flying to Cuba from, let's say you're checking in Miami, it might be that they sell it to you at check-in, but if you're not, or if they don't, it's sold at the gate. So you won't be able to miss it because they do what's called a document check, where they make sure you have your visa, make sure your passport's in order, and then they give you a stamp or a sticker on your boarding pass, and that allows you to board your flight to Cuba. Oh, they'll also check your QR code. So that visa costs anywhere from $50 to $100, and it is what's known as the pink visa, which is slightly more pink than the green visa. And now, if you were flying, let's say from the US, but your flight actually comes from Mexico or Panama, then you're going to need the green visa. And that's the visa that you would get from flying from any other country that you can buy in any of the ways that probably Alan is going to talk about now.
Okay, Sarah, did you say that if you come from Panama City into America and then to Cuba, you go on a green visa?
Yes, that's correct.
I had always assumed that as soon as you were in America, you changed to a pink visa, but if they're on, because America doesn't let people transit when they're going to Cuba, do they?
Yeah, you could transit if you had a visa for the US.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you can transit with a visa.
But
So that comes back to the visa. Is that because this was going to be a bit later on about the visa to enter US with a B2 visa, about like once you've traveled to Cuba, to enter the US, you can't just have the standard, is it the ESTA visa? You have to get a B2 tourist visa. So you can still go to the US. It just means you just have to apply for a different visa. And it's valid for 10 years. Is that right?
Most people, it can be valid up to 10 years. So what I hear from most people is that theirs is valid 10 years if they're from like Australia. If it's from Mexico, sometimes it's like 5 or 3 or whatever. But I hear a lot of people get a 10-year visa. Yeah. Which is super useful because then the US becomes your jumping point for any flight. You know, it opens up a whole new route for you, even if you don't want to visit the US.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry, can I just clarify? So when I searched for flights from New Zealand, the only flights I was getting were flights through US, Miami, Houston, and so on. So to go via US, I have to apply for the B1 visa, because even for transfers, I need a US visa. And I can't
So-
apply for ESTA. I have to apply for this one. But I would also for Cuban visa in advance, right?
No, you don't. The Cuban visa is not something you need to apply for, because you would buy it in Panama, let's say, if you go through Panama, or you would buy it in Mexico if you go through Mexico. I cannot speak to Europe. I think there's a airline that does sell it in the airport, but I don't think all of them do. But basically it's not an application, it's basically a purchase.
Okay.
Regarding transiting through the US, now, if you were just leaving through the US on the way to Cuba and you weren't flying directly from the US to Cuba, so let's say you were going from the US to Mexico, when you go to the US that first time, your ESTA, if you have one, would still be valid. But when you go into Cuba, in all likelihood, the Mexican airline is reporting that flight, or let's just say they may report that flight, and you would find your ESTA automatically revoked. So you would not be able to then transit back through the US without a visa. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I should apply in advance for B1 instead of ESTA.
B2.
Yes.
B2.
Yes. Yeah, I think
Okay.
B1 is for business travel. Yeah.
Okay.
I think B1 is for tourist travel. Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's really important to understand that once you've been to Cuba, you will never get an ESTA unless the American government changes the rules, because there's a question on the ESTA application that says, have you been to Cuba since 2000?
January 2021.
Yeah. And so and it's important, if people go to America regularly, then once they've been to Cuba, they will not be able to go to America on an ESTA. Hence, if you go through America on your way to Cuba, you're okay. But then because you've been in Cuba, the Americans won't let you back in. So you can't return on the same pathway. For you in New Zealand, if you were flying, where would you fly from Auckland to? Where's the most common?
I've seen connections via LA, but also something via Houston and Miami.
Houston. Yeah.
Houston. Okay, Houston has a direct flight to Cuba. We're United, is it, Sarah? I think.
Yeah.
So if you fly Auckland, Houston, then you would be able to fly Houston to Havana. My understanding is that you would get the Cuba visa in Houston, Sarah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
But you wouldn't then be able to come back Havana, Houston, Auckland.
If she had a visa, she could.
You would. Now, the thing about the B2 visa in Australia, I can't speak for New Zealand, but the process here is you have to apply for it and pay for it before you get access to the interview times. In Australia, we interview in Sydney and Melbourne. So if you don't live in Sydney and Melbourne, you have to get there. Once you've paid and applied, you'll get access to the interview times. Now, when you first get the interview times, it will suggest that the wait time for a B2 visa is 125 days. And that puts a lot of people off. The actual trick of the exercise is once you've got access to that interview schedule, you check it regularly and grab a cancellation. I had a client who thought they had to wait 122 days. She went and checked the schedule daily and she got an appointment 3 days later. So that's in Australia, and that I suspect is probably the same in New Zealand. That's the thought to do it.
That's great to know. Thanks, Alan. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like, despite that, the message about a B2 tourist visa for the US is apply now. So you don't cut yourself short.
And during the interview, if I say that the only purpose for that visa is for me to get to Cuba, is this something that they would consider a reason not to give that visa?
I don't think so, but I wouldn't say that anyhow. I mean, just
I
say,
agree.
I travel quite a bit and I often transit the USA, and sometimes I stay a few days and I go to Mexico and I go to Wawa and they may not even ask you if you're going to Cuba. I don't know what they ask. But the people that I've spoken to after they've had the interview have said it was no problem. It's quite straightforward.
Yeah, I would say Mexico, even though the Cuba travel is not technically supposed to in any way affect the visa process, God forbid you get like a Cuban American who has their own political views on the situation. And because the visa process is so arbitrary that you don't want someone's like personal feelings to get in the way. And Cuba is like a hot topic for some people. So yeah, like if they ask where you're going or whatever, what your travel plans are, I would just say, US, Mexico, Canada, that kind of thing.
And the fact you're from New Zealand, we have to transit through everywhere to get anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the problem with being in New Zealand or Australia. We have to transit through a lot of these. And I know every time you just transit through the US, you've got to pay a fee. So, I think when I looked it up the other day, it was 185 US for the B2 visa, like you said, and it lasts longer. And I think it was 16 US for an ESTA, I think. But Alan will go back to just getting a standard green visa for us. You don't have to go via the US, and we'll talk a bit about that. There are other ways to get around that.
And if you can, if the only reason you're going through the US is because it's convenient, you actually don't intend to spend any time in the US on the way over or the way back, work hard to find an alternative. Like go through Canada or Europe or South or Central America. I could talk a bit more about that a bit later, but there also is something called a US transit visa, which is intended for people who are not leaving the airport. So you're flying into Miami and just staying airside and going onto a flight to Havana. Because one of the things to remember about the US is you cannot transit the US without entering the US. It's not like Singapore where you can wander around between terminals willy-nilly. In the US, you have to enter and then leave again. So you're always going to be showing your passport and showing your US entry status visa. I, for the life of me, have tried to find out what a transit visa is and how you get it. Even the US Embassy in Australia can't tell me, but there is one, and it's designed for people who, I think it's defined by, you're not going to be in the US overnight, so you're going to be in the airport, go nowhere. But I can't find out anymore. If you can find out more about it,
I'll have a look.
It would be, I think it's easier and quicker than the B2 visa, and probably cheaper than the B2 visa. But I've exhausted all my resources and I can't find out about it.
So that's all of the US stuff, but the actual visa to enter Cuba is very easy. Just to put you at rest.
A visa to enter Cuba. This is a green one, okay? The pink one's identical. I'll show you the green one. That's right. It's a double-sided piece of paper, and either the people who issue it to you will have filled in your name and your passport and your whatever else it says, or you'll get it blank and you fill it in yourself. When you enter Cuba, they tear off, got a perforation down the middle. They tear one side and keep it. When you leave Cuba, you give them the other side. There's nothing in your passport. They don't even have to see your passport to issue it. I actually issue them here for anyone who lives in Australia can apply for it on our website, and I'm the actual issuer of those. And I fill it in and I post it, but we can't post it. We only post to an Australian address. So,
And I can do the New Zealand ones because I got a contact in the Cuban embassy in Wellington. So it's literally a case of just filling in some paperwork. You send a copy of your passport. It gets delivered to, so you either can hand deliver it, but you just deliver it to the Cuban embassy. They had a pretty quick turnaround here in New Zealand, and then you send a South courier bag and they will courier it, or again you can pick it up directly from the embassy. And I personally found that process for New Zealand, it was very simple and really easy, and I'd say it would be the same for you, Alan, in Australia, wouldn't it?
yeah, it is. And there is also there are also some online sites that sell it. Sarah, I know you've used one, and you found it to be reliable.
You mute it. You got to unmute.
Can't hear you, Sarah.
Yeah, it was until it wasn't reliable, but I did find another service. But I would suggest, unless you have a really good reason, if you're flying through the Americas, unless you have a really good reason for buying your visa in advance, or like it sounds super easy, like Gina said, like don't buy it in advance. It's not worth it because it's $25 in a country that's not US, and like 50 to 100, and you're going to pay more than that if you buy a pink visa in advance. So it's just super easy. It's part of the process.
Yeah, same with the green one. If you buy it at Cancun Airport or Mexico City Airport or wherever, it's easy. It's easy to get and it's cheaper.
So that would depend, then come back to your flight route, wouldn't it? So like I went via Spain, so via Madrid, because they also have direct flights. So I got my visa in advance.
Yeah.
So it would, once you've, I suppose it's a process of picking things off in the order that they need to be done. Is like, are you planning travel through the US quite regularly? If so, get a B2 visa. Where is your flight route going to be? Will it be via the US, or are you going to go around the US and come in via Mexico or Canada, like you mentioned, or Europe, and then just tick it off as you go? I know it sounds very daunting and complicated, but I think once you just break it down into those chunks, it's very doable. It's just, yeah, just making sure you tick those boxes. Would you both agree with that?
Yeah, I would also say if you're using a flight engine to look for your flights to Cuba, you're not going to get the best result.
No.
It's better just to like do it yourself with the airline. Find out which airlines go to Cuba. I don't know if Gina has that information, but our website has that information. And then just piece together the flight yourself, or even, hire a travel agent that's in your country.
An agent would be best, because Expedia and TripAdvisor, a few others, they won't show flights to Cuba at all. Skyscanner, you can, but you have to be very careful. This is just from personal experience, where you enter. So if you entered Canada, like any port in Canada, whether it's Montreal, Toronto, or Vancouver, if you put in Havana, it won't show up any direct flights. But if you put in Varadero, is it Varadero?
Varadero.
Varadero, there are direct flights to Varadero, which is only about an hour and a half from Havana. Is that correct? So It's just knowing what to put in the search engine to bring up the correct flights, because there's lots of direct flights from certain ports, but they won't always show up in search engines. So For Canada, you definitely don't put Havana, put that other one, and there's lots, and it's actually quite cheap to fly from Canada into Cuba. And Air New Zealand has put direct flights back on to Canada. And the other one was, either fly to the US, then to Mexico or Panama. I found Panama was quite a good option, and then direct Cuba, and then just, a different route home. So you're avoiding, like I said, Madrid had direct flights. There's quite a few ports in Europe that have direct flights to Cuba. Is that right, Alan?
Madrid, Paris, Istanbul. Turkish Air fly direct from Istanbul. Madrid, Paris, there's another one there. Zurich, they have direct flights. And it might seem a long way around, but it's not necessarily an expensive option.
No.
You go, you can actually go one stop to Europe, and then, so you're actually doing 3 flights. If you fly, I don't know if Auckland flies to, let's say, Doha, then to Madrid, and then you've got 1 flight from Madrid to Havana. So you're only doing 3 flights, where when you start to add up the other way, sometimes it can be more complicated. Air Canada, just on what you were saying, Gina, Air Canada pre-COVID used to fly into Havana as well as Varadero. They haven't recommenced that. They might. The reason the Canadian Airlines fly into Varadero more so than Havana is that a very large majority of Canadians go to the resorts, and Varadero is a resort place. So it's all about numbers. That's where they go to get some sun. They don't necessarily see, the only Cubans they see are the ones working in the resorts most of the time.
Yeah.
On the flight thing, just let me, while we're on that, certainly Europe is an option that more and more people are looking at. Canada is an option a lot of people take. It might seem funny going up and then coming back down, but now LATAM or LAN or whoever, the South American airline, have just started direct flights from Lima to Havana. Can go to Santiago to Chile, go to Lima, and then go direct to Havana. I don't know what the connections are like, but that's possible. And the other South America, Panama we've mentioned, but also you can fly direct from Colombia, from Bogota. There's a direct flight from there with an airline called Widero, W-I-D-E-R-O-P, that no one knows about. They fly direct from Bogota to Havana. So, and the Mexico option is the most common one, but the key thing is you've got to get to Mexico. You can fly from Santiago to Chile to Mexico City. So you could go from wherever to Santiago to Chile, then to Mexico City, then to Cuba. So there are quite a few options that avoid the US.
Yeah, so I think the more I've played with it, the more options I've actually found, and it's just knowing what to put in the search box. If you do know, Ellen's a travel agent, but if you do know any travel agents, you can bounce some ideas off too. I think I've played around with lots of different flight routes and connecting flights, and for New Zealanders, and I'd say similar to maybe Australia, on average, including getting there and back and connecting flights, I'm coming back with around $3,500 in total. That's like getting to a port to get you into Cuba, out of Cuba, and back again. I think I can get one for about 2.5, but it's just playing around, like Ellen said. It's the time. Sometimes you end up sitting in airports or spending a different night. You might as well go, a few hours longer in a plane and have a more convenient flight and an easier, less stressful transit.
When you buy flights, it's a classic case of you get what you pay for.
Yeah. And Doha's quite a good connection if you're going that way.
Direct out of Auckland to Doha now, haven't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. There's some quite cheap flights to Europe out at the moment. There were some really cheap ones into the US that have just come up. But again, if you can get to the US cheap and then like on to Mexico or another port, and it still works out economical. But we're slowly getting more and more flights coming back, coming out of New Zealand. So, but I think personally, either that Canada, or your option, from what I can see, is probably the most convenient, I suppose, if you put it that way.
This is a personal question. Who did you fly from Madrid to Havana with?
Air France.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was an 8-hour direct flight. It was really good. I mean, ironically, it's, I went, for those of you that don't know, I went in 2016 and I just booked this. I went into the travel agent just to go to Cuba and found it was really expensive from New Zealand, and then started playing with how could I get to Cuba. Ended up with a trip added on to Europe and, extended it a bit, went and then flew direct out of Europe to Havana. Went with Cuban Adventures, had an amazing time, hence why I want to share it, because it is a different location. It is slightly more complicated and complex, but it is so worth it. Me and Sarah were having a conversation about it, and I'll just bring you in now, Sarah, because I know you've got to go. But if you can just share a couple of things about once we're on the ground, like the internet, how that works, and just the cultural stuff we were talking about. I thought it was really, really relevant, how the Cuban people are, if you want to just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. So we were talking about how Cuba is as a solo female traveler, because we both traveled there alone by ourselves. So Cuba is a place that is generally very, very warm and very welcoming. So people are friendly. There are people, especially they're looking to make some money off of you, whether it's in your best interest or not. But being aware of that, being confident enough to give a firm no, that should be enough. Cuba is a very flirtatious country. So you might find that you're getting more attention than you do where you live. And, some people, that's fine and they enjoy it and it helps them walk with a little more swagger. And some people are very put off by that. And again, just being firm, no, don't play, it should take care of that. There's very few incidences of physical violence in Cuba against tourists. It's mostly going to be crimes of opportunity, stealing your phone if you're not paying attention, or, pickpocketing, stuff like that. Even then, generally speaking, there's not a lot of that. And there's not a lot of drugs in Cuba. Drugs are very highly penalized. So that no drugs, no weapons, that creates a safer environment. There's, a lot of appreciation for the female form of all kinds of women there. So I think that that's kind of a nice aspect of the culture. They're not so hung up on the Barbie movie, people who look like they came out of the Barbie movie. And then in terms of safety, or in terms of if you don't feel comfortable, use your guide as a resource. Let your guide know if there's something that's making you feel uncomfortable. And if you don't, for some reason, feel comfortable talking to your guide, contact the manager. The manager is very concerned with your experience. Her name is Kirenia, and she will make sure that she will confer with the manager of the company and make sure that you are taken care of, that your problems are resolved. But don't let it go, right? Don't let it go. If somebody's making you feel uncomfortable, say something. But I think it's a wonderful, wonderful experience for a solo female traveler, or just female travelers in general, because of the safety, because there is a lot of respect for women in Cuba. I would say more than in the country that I live in. And then in terms of communication, check with your local phone, but if you want to use the Cuban network, the easiest thing for you to do is to get a tourist SIM card that you will purchase online. There's a website called Suena Cuba. And so you can pick that up in Terminal 3 upon arrival before you go through customs, like before they do your passport check. There's going to be a kiosk and you just pick up your SIM and they are so great about helping you install it. There's a couple of things that you need to do and they'll give you instructions, but if you don't want to do that, just ask them for help with it. And other than that, if you don't want to buy a SIM, that SIM is $35 and it should give you enough data, texting, and calls to make it through your trip. But if you don't want to do that, or if you have a phone that isn't unlocked, it's locked to your provider, or if you have a phone that has an eSIM, it won't work with that. So you would just connect to the internet at Wi-Fi spots, which are throughout every place you're going to go. Some casas or, accommodations, bed and breakfast, guest houses, whatever you want to call them. Some of them do have Wi-Fi connection. It's not usually free, but if they don't, there's going to be public places that do have it, and also hotels will have it. So you just buy a card and it has a scratch off login, and you just enter that number in you connect to the Wi-Fi, it pops up the page, you'll enter that number and then you can connect. And then you just need to make sure you disconnect and log out when you're done using it. So Cuba, I will say in general, is a good place to disconnect, to live in the moment, stay out of your phone. Because if you are so eager to have social media or have those things, sometimes things in Cuba don't work and you're just leaving yourself in a situation to get very frustrated. Because we can tell you all the things and all the ways that Cuba should be, but Cuba is never black and white. And that's part of like the experience, going with the flow, having the adventure, being like, oh, this would never happen in my country. And then going home and feeling more grateful for the things that are convenient for you.
Yeah, I think you put it really well. And like I had a guide when I was there and he said Cuba's like an onion. There are many, 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 many layers. And that's the thing, you'll have me, you'll have our guide, you'll have, the backup resources of Cuban Adventures. So if there are any sort of issues, you've got multiple layers of people there to look after you.
Okay, yeah, that's even better. You'll have Gina. Gina will take care of you.
So there's multiple layers there, yeah.
And I always say when people ask, like, is it safe or whatever, I said, basically, one of the key things about Cuban style is mañana. Now, mañana means tomorrow, and tomorrow never happens. So if something was scheduled to happen today and it didn't, someone will say mañana. And that's, worry about it, tomorrow and blah, blah. It's one of the reasons why on our tours, we're quite keen to leave flexibility in the itinerary, because you'll be on your way on the bus, say, to Vinales, and the guide will know about 2 things that are available tomorrow that aren't normally available. Or he or she will know about 2 things that are normally available where the person who runs them had gone away tomorrow. So there's a sort of a, it's a flow thing, and you'll get much. And the other thing I say to people all the time is you'll get the best out of Cuba if you leave your Western values at the door.
Yeah,
nice.
Don't go in there expecting it to meet your Western ideals of reliability and predictability and all those things, because it's not going to happen. And that's when you'll get frustrated. You'll get more frustrated about that than you will about the attention from, what are they called? Jintenaros or something.
Jineteros, yeah.
Who are sort of paying you attention. You'll get more frustrated if you're expecting things to happen that just ain't gonna happen, because that's how it goes. Don't count on an ATM working. 2 reasons they don't work, and you shouldn't use them anyhow. 2 reasons. One is any card in any bank in the world that's got links to America won't work in an ATM, and most banks have. Second one is sometimes they forget to fill them up with money.
Sometimes there's no money to fill them up with.
So no money to fill them up.
Sometimes the electricity is out.
Yeah.
That's why we bring all cash, no matter what country you're from. You've got to bring enough cash
Yeah.
for your whole day.
And we'll leave that onto currency. So again, I'll pre-warn, this sounds more complicated than what it is. Do you want to go first, Sarah, regarding the currency? Because now just explain how we've gone to the one peso and then the foreign exchange to use.
Yeah, so Cuba had two currencies for a while. So anytime you see an article that talks about the CUC or the convertible peso, that's gone because they got rid of that during the pandemic. Now there is Cuban pesos, which is abbreviated CUP, but foreign currency is in circulation as well. So you could go your whole trip just using US dollars or euros and not ever have to exchange to the local currency. When you buy something, you'll usually get change in CUP, and then you could use that for smaller purchases or tipping. But I will say this, if you want to change to local currency, because it will make things, 20 to 30% cheaper, but it is a hassle, then wait until you talk to your guide. If you cannot wait till you talk to your guide, then try to exchange with the staff at the casa or staff at a restaurant, because there are two currencies that are vastly different from each other that are operating in Cuba. One is the official currency and the other one is the black market rate. So you don't want to get that official rate because you're just throwing away your money. You want the black market rate, but you don't want to exchange with any person on the street because, again, these are jineteros and they're not likely to have your best interests or best exchange rates to offer you. So just wait. And if you can't wait, ask somebody who has a business that they're running, that they have a reputation to uphold.
Yeah, because I remember our guide took us as a group because there was quite a few of us that wanted to exchange money. So again, that's something we can do. We can go, a bunch of us, with our guide. And if anyone wants to exchange, go and do it then, just to have that local person. Because if you're not fluent in Spanish, it does help if you are fluent in Spanish. But again, it's a problem easily solved, and with the help of our guides and myself, we can easily, accommodate that. But I think some people struggle easy with trying to work out currency conversions. I would just park that because it is that more complicated, and just there's the indicator of the daily, like the budget you would need for your overall trip, and if you that's on the site. Hi Shelby, and if you want to use that, just so you know, I need X money for my whole trip, and as long as you've got that, then we can worry about the conversion once we're there.
Yeah, I will say this too. So I've polled our past travelers, and most of them prefer just to use their home currency, if that's euros or US dollars. Some people in the forums, they feel like they're being ripped off if they're only given a menu in US dollars or euros, which are sometimes known as MLC. And that's not the case, because Cuban currency has such a low value that some places don't want to take it, even though they're Cuban places. Like, for goodness sakes, they don't accept CUP in the airport. Once you go through the passport check to leave the country, they don't accept it. So none of those shops you're going to be able to spend your last Cuban pesos for, which is a vote in favor of not exchanging Cuban pesos, because you don't want to be left over with them. They have no value outside the country. You cannot buy them outside the country. You cannot exchange them outside the country. They're basically funny money. So you will save yourself a lot of trouble, but you will pay for that convenience with, maybe your meal is going to cost $8 instead of $5. So I was telling Gina, it's not like, you don't look at it like, oh, I'm paying this much more or less than with whichever currency. Look at it like, okay, is this a reasonable price for what I'm receiving?
Mm.
If I have a cocktail that is $8, okay, it's a little bit pricey, but my cocktails at home are $16. So to me, it's just like, I'm not gonna stress about nickel and diming, because what can happen is you can exchange money to CUP and get a stack this big that is worth $50. And then you have to carry that around and you have to count it out when you use it. And if you're not a math person, you will have an anxiety attack trying to deal with this local currency. So
yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because even just going to Bali, I have clients that struggle to wrap their head around currency conversion, and they actually start to get quite worked up. And then when it comes to bartering, they start arguing over like 20 cents or 50 cents, so it's just if in doubt, like, we can do a currency cheat sheet. I did that for Bali, and it's just a quick thing you can have on your phone. So if you're not sure, you can just do a quick look. I think it's similar, Ellen, for your currency and New Zealand currency, isn't it, for US and euros at the moment? The one thing Sarah did, which was, I thought was really relevant, depending on where you're traveling from, it is actually for us in New Zealand and Australia, I'd say better to our exchange rate is better with the US, so we get more bang for the buck converting to get US dollars rather than euros. Would that be right, Alan?
Look, it just varies so much.
Yeah.
If you want to check that out, then you have a look at the US to euro exchange rate.
Yeah.
But if you get, I mean, the message that I'm coming in my head as we're talking about this is, if you're gonna, you can very easily complicate your trip to Cuba. You can complicate before you go, and you can complicate it while you're there. And if you do complicate it more than necessary, you'll strip away some of the enjoyment. That just, it'll happen. You've got a guide, a Cuban guide, who knows everything, so they will be able to help you with everything. Just the combination of park your Western values at the door, let it happen, let Cuba flow over you, and you'll love it. If you complicate it and worry about things that you don't need to worry about, then you'll spoil your trip.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, because that's even when Sarah and I was talking earlier, when you start, even when you're probably, anyone who's watching this listens to it back, it starts to sound very complicated and in the too hard basket. But in reality, it actually isn't. It just, there is steps, but it isn't as complicated as it seems. And once you're there, well, from personal experience, once I was there, I personally didn't have any issues. The only thing is, I wished I'd taken my Lonely Planet guide for a map, like a hard copy book. Other than that, so I ended up taking a photo of, there was a big billboard map of Havana. So I just took a photo of that and used that, because I arrived before the rest of the group arrived. Other than that, I was very lucky. I don't know if it will happen this time. My ATM card did actually work. I'm with ANZ. But at no time while I was there did I feel stressed. And I think what Alan said, things are done differently, and we take things for granted in our Western culture. And I think what Alan has hit the nail on the head by just parking those expectations at home and embracing this as part of the experience, that it is a different country. They do things quite differently, but that's why you're going there in the first place. And you've got the support. You've got multi-layers of support to help you right through the process.
One of the joys of Havana is actually getting lost.
Yeah. Everywhere is the best part.
All Havana's got all these narrow streets with kids playing and people's washing and this and that and this and that. Just turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, get lost and work it out.
Yeah. And like I said, I found it so safe. At no stage did I feel, even at night, I had no concerns. Like what Sarah was saying regarding drugs and stuff, I didn't see any issues at night time. I mean, just common sense, like anywhere. But Ella, did you have any questions? I know we've covered a lot and it has sounded quite complicated. I've seen you frowning a few times. And I know there's
I'm sorry, that's my face. No, all good. You've pretty much answered all the questions, and yeah, as you say, it's somebody who travels, that's no surprise there.
Yeah.
Just remember that Cuba is predominantly on 110 volt power. So, and I say this from experience, we took our espresso machine, didn't we? And we plugged Casa particular, and the bloody thing didn't work because it's 240 volt. So, for example, if you want to take a hairdryer, try and take one that's dual voltage. They'll have one. Or they'll have one there. Or just be aware that, I mean, the hotels now have the 220, 240 as well, but Casa particulars predominantly are going to be 110 volts. So just check your appliances.
I took a multi-adapter, like a multi-country adapter, because I did find in one of my Casas, and I know it's because they got to use what's available. There were like 2 different sorts of plugs in the wall. So if you've got a multi-adapter, it was a good thing.
The adapter's fine, but the voltage is another thing.
Yes.
That's what I always use, the multi-adapter, multi-country socket adapter. But actually, on a recent trip in Kenya, it killed it, the Kenyan, and I lost multiple cables too on top of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think that the adapter is the solution.
Is there there must be a adapter converter for voltage, is there? Yeah.
Like a surge protector. I would get a surge protector.
That's a good idea. But I mean, those tech things, obviously there's more countries than Cuba that operate like that too. So that's just a case of just getting the right tech ahead of time.
You probably won't need a surge protector, Sarah, if the power goes off for 3 days.
Yeah, but I don't know. I get nervous. I don't know if it's like just Cuban electronics, but sometimes when the power goes out and then it comes back on, it shorts out.
Same,
whatever.
Yeah, we have that here, and in the rural areas, I've got surge protectors on my TV. So yeah, we do that. We have touched on the visa process. Oh, sorry, Alan.
Communication. If you're going to use the internet, so you're going to get a Wi-Fi card, do that. The predominant form of communication from Cuba to the outside world is WhatsApp. So anyone you want to talk to or message back home, get them to make sure they're on WhatsApp before you go, and that it works well. And that's all we communicate with the Cuban staff on WhatsApp all the time.
Yeah, I use WhatsApp. I usually create, and I'm doing the same for this trip, as a pre-group chat, so everyone gets to know each other, and then everybody has everybody's contacts, because in Bali too, everybody uses WhatsApp. So I make sure, and again, all the links to visa processes and everything that's required will get put on for everybody's information. So we touched on the visa process, both from the US and going into Cuba, the currency, communication, local payments, cultural etiquette, and plugs and electronics. So the last one really is travel insurance. I know, Ellen, you've got a bit, and I had a quick look. I know one cover does Cuba, so it's just making sure you know a bit about that too, don't you?
Yeah, there's a couple of things about travel insurance. One is if you are flying from the US into Cuba, say Miami to Havana, then the Cuban travel insurance, called ASISTUR, ASISTUR, is included in your ticket, and you hold on to your boarding pass. And if you have to get medical services or hospital services, you show that, and that's all good. My advice to people is, number one, make sure you've got a travel insurance policy that includes Cuba. So when you buy it for getting there and all that, which is what you said, Gina, I actually suggest to people that even if you have got that, you still buy the As Is to a Cuban policy. It's cheap. It hasn't got brilliant coverage, but every health service in the US, in Cuba knows it. And so if you go to hospital and they want to know if you've got insurance, if you show them the As Is to a policy, they know straight away. If you show them a Cover-More policy, sometimes they can fiddle around trying to work out if it actually covers you. I mean, the medical services are free, and they're amazing. So it's no problem about that. You just want to make it, if you need the medical services in an emergency, you just want to make it as easy as possible. So, because there are some quite complex, unknown travel insurance policies out there that I wouldn't have even heard of, let alone someone in a Havana hospital. So, it's about $3 or $4 a day, I think, the Cuban buy it on our. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I mean, travel to anywhere, you wouldn't go now without travel insurance anyway. So even if you have your standard policy and then you add on just a bit for Cuba, would be probably cover all bases, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, I think it's a good, and don't let any ever tell you that the health system in Cuba is dangerous or poor. I have personal experience, I think Sarah does too, of the amazing quality of medical service in Cuba. So, yeah, it's not a problem. You won't have health issues in Cuba.
Yeah, I agree with that, with the caveat that you really need to bring like all the medicine that you think you're going to need, because in my experience, the doctors, the level of care has been outstanding, but the resources have been non-existent. So they, didn't have bandages, they didn't have crutches. And fortunately, you're traveling with Cuban Adventures, you're kind of part of the Cuban Adventures family. And so people will things out for you, but the care was perfect. And just to let you know, I definitely agree with Alan. I'm flying American Airlines, so I have my insurance included, but I bought another policy because, again, like Gina said, these days, don't travel anywhere without travel insurance.
Yeah.
So, and you can buy the policy that Alan's talking about as a store in the airport, but I think it's easier just to buy it in advance.
Yeah. And again, I'll put bullet points of all these things because, like I said, I know this all sounds very daunting, and but once it's broken down, it's quite easy. And to be honest, since traveling post-pandemic, a lot of these things are standard now for many destinations, not just Cuba. As far as entry visas, that has changed, custom forms, travel insurance. So it's not just related to Cuba, it's many destinations now.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think we've covered everything. Well, just about everything. There's bound to be something else. But like I'm here, Sarah's here, and Alan's here. So if there's any questions, I mean, you guys have been great, and I really appreciate your time. So I know it was early for you, Alan.
No, I'm an early bird.
And I know Sarah was busy, so I'll be watching Sarah on her adventures. But I just want to thank your time, and I'll send this out to everybody else that couldn't make it today. But yeah, have a great time in Cuba, Sarah, and share heaps of stuff.
I will.
Inspired.
We'll see how that connection is, but yeah, I'm so excited.
Well, maybe
Cuba's
when you get
wonderful.
back, then you'll post it. Yeah.
Cuba's a wonderful, wonderful place, and nothing should ever stop you from going. So I hope you get a great group, and that it's a memorable experience. It's an experience for your heart.
Yeah, and I think it's that, like you touched on it before, that it's the cultural experience. Like It's not just a off-the-shelf box tour. There's it's so much deeper. And like Ellen, you said about your guide, I know we had Tatiana, and she seemed to be related to everybody, because she'd go, oh, this is my cousin, and we can go here, or oh, I know this person, they're married to my auntie, we can go here, you know. So it made it so much fun. Or she'd go, oh, this is my best friend, they own this bar, do you want to come dancing tonight, you know. So it was, you know, it put a whole nother level onto the trip. I would practice up on your salsa, everybody, because they will blow you out of the water. They're pretty amazing, aren't they?
Amazing dancers. And get a few, if you don't speak Spanish, get a few words of Spanish under your belt.
Yeah.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one last question, maybe more to Gina than anyone else.
Yep.
But when is the deposit required by, and how long does the early bird pricing apply for?
So I've done the early bird, I think, from memory to the end of March, and then the deposits are required as soon as you book. And then the cutoff date I've put from memory, I think it's 30th of June. And because the cutoff date for Cuban Adventures is in July, everything has to be paid and secured. And what happens too is that part of your visa, again, correct me if I'm wrong, once you're confirmed and you're paid, Cuban Adventures sends an itinerary, and your itinerary is part, for here in New Zealand, part of the visa process, because you send your copy of your itinerary and your flight. So is that the same for you, Ellen?
For the Cuba visa,
Yeah.
I don't send anything.
Oh yeah, and our one for the Cuban embassy, it was just a copy of the itinerary and a copy of a flight. Yeah.
Go to the Cuban embassy, but if you can find a way of avoiding going to the Cuban embassy, the only information that's needed for a tourist card or visa is your last name, your first name, your date of birth, your passport number, and your nationality. Full stop. Yeah. And none of that is verified at the process of getting it. It doesn't need to be. It might be verified on entry to Cuba. If the Cuban immigration people are on the ball that day, you might find yourself wandering through without having asked for a tourist card.
Because we can, like you said, the visas are only available to once you've processed them to an Australian address. So a New Zealander could get a visa through you as long as it was posted to an Australian address. Is that correct?
So if you want to coordinate that some way, then you gave me an Australian address that I posted them to, then that person can post them to you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was thinking. I could get a group of us, because I've got to go through the same process as everybody else that's coming on the trip. You know, I'm not exempt. I've got to do all the same things everybody else is doing. So if I get a whole bunch of us and I could send all the information in one go, get an address in Australia, I've got family there, and get it sent there and then courier it on from there. That would be quite an easy way to do it, wouldn't it?
Would be. And the other thing I will do as well, I'll just check, because it's only a cost thing. I'll just check what sending it direct to you would be, and see if we can do that. Because if you coordinate it at your end and I put them all in one envelope, pieces of card, I'll put them all in one envelope, post them to you, and you redistribute them. I'm sure get around that.
Yeah, so, there's ways around it, I'm sure.
You want to start a process of people of who wants a visa through you, and it'll need to be applied for on our
on the website. Yeah.
I'll work on how we can do that for you at this end.
Awesome. That'd be wonderful. And I was thinking whether just to go through the process of doing the B2 visa, just so I've got it, because I have got friends that I do visit in the US, but also then I can reiterate the process of doing a B2 visa if anybody needs it as well. So that's the other thing I might look at. So it just gives them another layer. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm going to sign off and let everybody go back to their day and evening. And I appreciate everybody's time here, and we'll be in touch, Ellen, and have a great time, Sarah. And thanks to Ella and Joe. I know Shelby
It was
clipped in
very
for a while.
informative. Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this, Gina.
No, and that's what I mean. Cuban Adventures is supplying the tour because I think Cuba is such a special place. You need an extra layer of expertise to put it together, and I don't want to recommend a company I personally haven't used. So hence using Cuban Adventures, and I love your ethos as well. And then I'm just that extra layer of support and help and hosting, so I'm here right from any time to get hold of me, because I know sometimes it's just good to have a sounding board, even if it's just to talk about flights and different ways. And I think what will end up also happening is a few people will end up flying together, just because we are limited with our flight routes. So that's something that we can chat about as well within our own group. But I just want to thank you. I'll let you go so you can finish your packing.
Bye.
I hope that goes around. Thank you so
Take
much
care,
for
everyone.
making the
Thank you.
time. Thanks, Ellen. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks everybody. And I will post this replay. I will email it out to everyone, and I'll email you a copy, Ellen, if you want to use any of it as well. And I'm just saying hello to your wife in the background as well.
Ginny, that's Ginny.
Hi. Yeah, and I will post this. Sorry?
She's doing the real work while I'm doing the TV.
That's normal. Yeah,
Okay.
and thank you very much. And I will post this replay and send it out to everyone. So thank you very much. Thanks, Alan. Bye.
Bye.